The lock on the gate was still new, the cold metal catching the light when I brushed my fingers against it. The door didn't budge, and before I could get a word out, Diane was already standing on the steps, arms crossed, voice calm like she was announcing the lunch menu. The company's been sold, and this family only keeps the ones who matter. Not a single extra note, not a hint of hesitation. Right after that, she turned away, like she just delivered a verdict signed long ago. I stood there, cold, still. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask where do we go now. I just looked at the door that had been locked behind us, a multi-million-dollar estate, a $500 million deal just closed, and we were pushed out like two guests who walked into the wrong house. Beside me, Aaron stayed quiet. He didn't bow his head. But I saw the tightness in his jaw, the thing he always tried to hide when his pride was stepped on. His eyes didn't drop. They stayed on that closed door like he was committing something to memory. I didn't reach for him. He didn't say a word. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was just clear. I took a breath, then let my hand fall away from the lock. If I want to understand this, I told myself, to really understand it, I have to go back to when things hadn't shown their true colors yet. When I first stepped into that family, I never imagined the ending would look like a scene this cold. I'm Lana, back then just a supply chain analyst, the kind of person who lived by logic and liked seeing things run smoothly. I met Aaron, my husband, during a factory line inspection. He was a production engineer, the quietest person in the room, but the one who could answer every difficult question. We fit together in a steady way, not too fast, not too loud. I liked his quiet. He said he liked how I faced problems head on without sugarcoating anything. But his family was a different world. From the first moment I met her, Diane, his mother felt like someone used to making decisions for the whole room. She spoke gently, but there was always a layer of control you couldn't quite touch. She believed the world ran on reputation and context, not on dry analysis reports. And Victor, Aaron's brother, was the type who liked being in front of a crowd. Everything he said circled around leadership, expansion, brand, but whenever the conversation required real knowledge, he'd glance at Aaron for a hint. Their family ran like a small empire. The louder you were, the more important you looked. The more work you did, the more you were treated as obvious. Aaron belonged to the second group. He worked quietly on the factory floor, streamlining processes, fixing the tiny problems everyone else skipped. And with people like him, no one ever noticed what he'd done, except me. I was used to watching data, and data never lies. But in those family meetings, there was something that always tightened my chest. When Aaron shared an idea to improve the system short, Clear Victor always finished with the same line. That's pretty much what I was thinking too. And people believed him. Aaron didn't react. He didn't look annoyed. He just wrote notes in his notebook, like he always did. The first time I asked him, "Doesn't that bother you?" he just said, "I'm not doing it to get credit. I'm doing it so it runs right." His voice was so steady it was hard to believe, and that steadiness made me feel calm. But I soon realized something. In that family, his quiet was the very thing that made them underestimate him the most. I remember one evening, everyone gathered to talk about expanding the production line. Victor presented a new optimization proposal. I looked at the slide and recognized it instantly. That framework was Aaron's. Every step, every number, every chart. I glanced at Aaron. He was drinking water, eyes on the screen, saying nothing. I whispered, "That's yours." He nodded slightly. "It's fine." But I knew it wasn't fine. He just wouldn't say it. The feeling in that moment, it wasn't anger. It was a cold pull down my spine. The kind you get when you know someone's stealing something important, and the only person hurt by it is the quietest one in the room. The longer I lived in that house, the more I noticed something strange. everything valuable in the company, from production flow, cost optimization, even the way inputs were adjusted, carried Aaron's fingerprints. But in investor meetings, the name they praised most was Victor's vision. I watched. I took note. I didn't escalate anything. I didn't complain. But day by day, I felt more certain something was deeply off. Aaron wasn't the type to demand credit. He let the truth do that on its own. But what unsettled me most was how he looked at those meetings, like he knew something bigger was being built out of the pieces he created. One night, as we left a late meeting, I asked, "They don't see it?" He said, "They see it. They just choose not to." I turned to look at him. His eyes then weren't sad, weren't angry, just a strange kind of stillness, like he'd grown used to being placed second. That was the moment I knew. There was something important being hidden in this story, and it wasn't about Victor taking credit. It was about Aaron himself, about what he'd been quietly building for years, something his family treated as obvious, something they thought they could take from him anytime they wanted. It wasn't until that mansion door locked in front of us that I finally understood they'd forgotten where the real value was and who actually held it. From the day I watched Victor present Aaron's ideas as if they were his own, I started noticing every detail in that house. And the more I observed, the clearer it became that what was being taken wasn't just ideas, it was value. The small cuts showed up during dinners that were supposed to be ordinary. Diane picked up some vegetables, placed them gently on Aaron's plate, and said in a tone meant for children, "You need to be realistic. No one cares about your little design plans." I looked at Aaron. He just set his chopsticks down, took a calm sip of water, no argument, no reaction. Victor let out a short laugh, as if it were an obvious truth. The comment wasn't loud, but it sliced through the air like a thin blade. Then came the family meetings. Victor kept presenting every operational improvement with his usual bold delivery. The charts about processing time, the downward cost lines, the rising efficiency metrics, I could tell at a glance they were Aaron's work. All of it carried his touch, but Victor spoke like the one who created it all. Diane nodded as if the credit naturally belonged to her eldest son, and Aaron sat at the corner of the table with his stack of notes, never reaching for anything. That's when I understood. In this family, noise was proof of ability. Silence was treated as worth nothing. No one asked who actually produced those numbers. They only looked at the one holding the microphone. I started sitting down every night, opening my laptop and documenting every change Aaron had made, every line of code fixing error alerts, every adjustment to the production flow, every sketch that saved millions in costs. Aaron didn't know I was doing this. I just wanted to keep the truth somewhere, in case the day came when it was wiped out. And just like he'd said, they see it. They just choose not to. The proof came when the company entered the prep phase for the sale. Suddenly, Aaron was cut out of a whole series of meetings. Invitations went to Victor and the executive team, not to the one person who knew every detail of the system. One evening, I asked him, "They don't need the person who designed the whole system." He just closed his laptop and said, "They want to sell a story, not the reality." His voice was cold, not bitter, but there was a layer of exhaustion underneath that he didn't say out loud. The family meeting happened again over the weekend. Diane wore a cream-colored coat, carrying herself like someone steering a major deal. She sipped her tea, then said with absolute certainty, "If this company sells at a high price, the credit goes to Victor." The room went quiet for a beat. I looked at Victor. He sat up straight, as if that was the most natural thing in the world. Aaron simply said, "The company runs because of the system, not the spotlight." No one responded, but I could see it clearly. Diane didn't like him saying anything that sounded real. I started to understand that Aaron wasn't being pushed aside because he lacked skill. It was because he didn't fit the story they wanted to sell, a story about a successful family built on leadership, not on the quiet man working in the factory. Then came the big injustice. That day, Victor presented the new technical packet they would send to the corporation negotiating the deal. He handed out printed copies to everyone. When I flipped to the first page, my chest tightened. It was the packet Aaron had spent 3 months building. Every chart, every formula, every block of code. The only difference was that the creator's name had been erased. I looked at Aaron. He was reading the printout like he was checking the weather report. His face didn't change, but his hand tightened just a little. I whispered, "They removed your name too?" Aaron said softly, "Yeah, it's fine." But it was clearly not fine. Not because they took his credit, but because what they took was the foundation of the company's future. And if they ran it wrong, everything would collapse. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't want to speak, but because I realized that if I said anything now, they'd dismiss me as defending my husband and ignore everything I'd seen. So I chose to watch, to see just how far they were willing to go. And then the twist of this whole chapter arrived. One afternoon, while we were in the factory checking the production line, someone from the buying corporation came to meet us. He shook Victor's hand first, polite in that surface-level way. But when he started talking about the operating system, his tone shifted. "I have a few questions for the person who built this foundation," he said, looking straight at Victor. "We need the right person in the room, because without them, this deal carries major risk." Victor paused. Diane stepped in, smiling, getting ready to introduce Victor as the brain behind the system. But the man looked around the room. Then his eyes landed on Aaron, who was standing next to the control panel. "You," he said. "I want to speak with you." The room went silent, like someone muted it. Victor froze. Diane opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I just looked at Aaron, and in that moment, I knew the buying corporation didn't come to hear a polished presentation. They came to find the person who actually understood how this company worked. The one person. The person his family had tried to erase from every document. The person they thought they could replace, the person they forgot, was the backbone of the entire operation. A cold wave ran down my spine. Not fear, clarity. When the $500 million deal was finally signed, I thought they would at least give Aaron an explanation. But Diane walked into the living room, set a stack of papers on the table, and spoke in a flat voice, like she was reading an announcement. "We're dividing assets starting today, and Aaron, you no longer have a place in this family or the company." The words fell without needing emotion. Victor sat beside her, arms crossed, as if the decision made perfect sense. I looked at Aaron. He didn't frown. He didn't ask why. He just adjusted his sleeve, a small, firm movement, the kind someone makes when they've understood everything long before it was said. Diane went on, "You two need to move out today. The cleaning staff will collect the keys." The house was thousands of square feet, but in that moment it felt small, almost suffocating from the cold inside it. We packed in silence. No one came to see us off. No words to hold us back. I thought everything ended at that gate, but the truth was only starting to surface. That night, Aaron opened his laptop to check his email. After a moment, he stopped, eyes sliding toward me. "The buying corporation emailed," he said. "They said they need to meet with the person who understands the core system." I sat down next to him. "You mean you?" Aaron nodded slightly. "No one else knows it from beginning to end." I knew that. The buying corporation definitely knew it too. The company could sell for $500 million because of the operating structure Aaron built from the ground up. Without it, all they had was an expensive empty shell. They want an in-person meeting tomorrow, Aaron said. A thin, cold line ran down my spine, like someone had finally turned on the light in the room Diane had tried so hard to keep in the dark. The meeting took place in the company's main conference room, the same room where Aaron had never been allowed to sit at the main table before. Today, he sat there, next to me, across from Diane and Victor. Farther down sat the representatives from the buying corporation, the kind of people who didn't trust stories, only data, and the person who created that data. The opening felt polite enough. Diane started, her voice full of confidence. Our family has always led the system. Victor is the one who developed the platform that drove the company's strong growth. Victor smiled, adjusted his tie, ready to step into the role of the hero. The representative nodded. We have a few technical questions. I saw Victor's hand stiffen just a bit. He was good at talking, good at performing, but technical work wasn't a language he could speak. The representative opened the packet. For the error prediction algorithm, can you explain how the exception handling works under overload conditions? Victor opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at Diane, like he was waiting for a signal, but she stayed silent. Slowly, Victor flipped through the pages, as if the answer might be hiding somewhere inside them. No one said a word. Then a calm voice broke the silence. Aaron, that case isn't handled by the algorithm. It's handled by cross sensors to prevent cumulative error. His voice wasn't loud or sharp. It was just correct. The representative looked up straight at him. You wrote this section? Aaron nodded. Part of it. The rest is in the technical design I submitted 3 months ago. I saw Diane pale. Victor clenched the packet so hard the pages wrinkled. The representative set his pen down, and then Aaron said the sentence that froze the entire room. If you want to prove that system is yours, he said, looking straight at Victor, eyes cold and steady, you can answer the last question I left in the design draft. Victor didn't answer. Diane turned to him, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw real panic on her face. No one in that family knew what the last question in that design draft was, except Aaron. The silence stretched out, sharp as a blade. None of them could hold on to the confidence they walked in with. The representative didn't wait for any further proof. He closed the packet. I'll be direct, he said. We'll only finalize the takeover if Aaron stays on as chief technical lead. Without him, this system can't be sustained. Diane shot to her feet. He's just someone who works on the factory floor. How can... He cut her off, his tone still polite but firm as steel. Ma'am, the $500 million valuation of this company comes largely from the operational structure Aaron built, not from the boardroom. I looked at Aaron. He sat upright, not smiling, not proud, but his eyes held a quiet clarity, the kind you see in someone who's finally being recognized for what they actually did. Victor collapsed into his chair. Diane tried to keep her face steady, but her hands were trembling. For the first time, they were forced to confront a truth they couldn't bend. The story they'd been building for years couldn't cover the foundation Aaron had created. The real shift showed when the representative ended the meeting with a sentence no one expected. If Aaron doesn't accept the new role, we'll reconsider the entire deal. Without his system, the valuation changes drastically. The room cracked open with a simple, brutal truth. Every bit of value that made the company worth $500 million came from Aaron. Not the family name, not Victor's presentations, not Diane's meetings. I saw Diane look at Aaron with an expression no longer arrogant, but afraid of losing something she once thought she controlled. But it was already too late. Power shifted in that room, without yelling, without any dramatic expose. Just because the truth stood up straight, needing no one to defend it. Right after the meeting that flipped everything, Aaron got a call from the buying corporation. The project manager's voice was clear and firm, no fluff at all. We want you to take the chief technical lead position. Long-term contract, full benefits. You're the one we need to maintain the entire operational structure. No flattery, no polished corporate invitation, just absolute respect for someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Aaron answered calmly, I need to read the documents carefully. His voice wasn't raised, not excited, just steady, the voice of someone finally being placed where he always belonged. When he hung up, I saw something I'd never seen so clearly during all those years in that house. He stood a little taller. No shadow of their dismissiveness hung on him anymore. I didn't say anything, but inside there was a quiet warmth, not pride, just relief. Relief because finally, everything about him was being seen for what it truly was. The next morning, his family actually panicked. Diane called nonstop. Victor texted nonstop, not to apologize, but to save the image they thought they still controlled. Diane was the first to show up. She walked into the living room where we were sorting through paperwork, her face trying to stay calm, but her eyes giving away how uneasy she was. Aaron, I think you should come back to the family. The media is asking why you weren't present during the deal. I want people to understand this family is united. I heard what she really meant, not unity. She just didn't want Aaron's absence exposing what they'd been hiding for years. Aaron looked at her. No avoiding her eyes, no dropping his gaze. You want me to come back, he said. To protect the family's image, right? Diane hesitated. I mean, you're still part of... He cut her off, but his voice was so soft it made the words twice as sharp. I never left. You just didn't see me. Diane stood still, as if his words had hit a place she couldn't defend with power or reputation. Then she turned away without another word. Victor came after, not with the posture of the confident older brother anymore, but of someone afraid of losing his place. Aaron, you need to tell the corporation that I'm the one leading the team. The media is starting to ask why the system has your signature. Aaron didn't answer right away. He looked at Victor for a long moment, not angry, not heavy, just honest. If you want to keep that position, Aaron said, you should learn how the system works before putting your name on it. Victor's face turned red, but he had no argument. He knew Aaron was right. So right he couldn't fight it. No yelling, no one pointing fingers, just the quiet collapse of a role that had been played for far too long. When we went back to the mansion to pack the rest of our things, the house didn't feel heavy anymore. The white walls, the paintings, the leather chairs that once made me feel like an outsider were now just objects. No power left attached to them. We packed each suitcase, not rushed, not regretful. Aaron locked the room behind us, turned to me and said, you know, I'm not angry at them. I just nodded. I understood. Anger was something they wanted us to carry so they could still feel powerful, but we didn't take anger with us. We only took clarity. When I stepped down the stairs, I looked back at the mansion one last time, not to remember it, but to confirm one thing. No one in that house had the right to define my husband's worth anymore. A few days later, something new happened. Quiet, but enough to change the direction of everything. The new corporation didn't just sign a contract with Aaron. They also launched a full review of all internal documents, especially the technical files under Victor's name. What had to happen finally did. An internal email leaked, showing Victor couldn't explain a single part of the system he had presented. An investigation team confirmed his signature on several documents was added after the fact, patched in, not the signature of the actual creator. The result? Victor lost all his executive roles. He was shifted to a consulting position with no authority. The reputation he built on other people's work collapsed in a week. I read the news in silence. Aaron stayed quiet too. No satisfaction. No, I told you so. The truth did its job on its own. We didn't need to touch anything. When the official signing took place, Aaron walked into the new building, not with the posture of someone proving he was right, but with the posture of someone stepping into the life he should have had all along. I walked beside him, and for the first time since entering his family, I felt like we were truly free, not because of money, not because of a title, but because he finally got to live in a place that saw him from the start, without anyone else's shadow over him. Our new apartment was on the 5th floor of a small building, with the morning sunlight cutting through the windows and stretching across the wooden floor. It wasn't big, it wasn't luxurious, but it was quiet in a way I never felt in that mansion. I usually woke up before Aaron, made some tea, opened my laptop, reviewed a few data reports from new clients. For the first few months, I didn't earn anything. I just sat beside Aaron, helping him organize and refine every document. But those nights sitting next to him, reading every line of numbers, every chart, every error log, slowly built a skill set I didn't even realize I was gaining. One day, I got an email from a major logistics company. Your portfolio and analysis are impressive. We'd like to invite you for a trial position. I read it over and over. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it felt like everything was finally moving in the direction it was always meant to. Aaron walked out of the bedroom, hair slightly messy from a late night of work. Good? He asked. Good, I said. And real? He smiled, a small smile, steady. The same way his system had run for years, low noise, high impact, and his new job grew so fast it even surprised him. The buying corporation gave him full control over every technical process. No one jumped in to take credit. No one meddled in his work. And most importantly, no one asked him to shrink himself to fit the family's image. He grew into the role quietly, but unmistakably. His family was a different story. After the storm of that confrontation at the company, Diane couldn't keep her place as the person behind every decision. Old investors started asking questions. How could a family that bragged about its reputation fail to recognize the real value inside their own home? The doubts never became a scandal. No explosions. Just a slow burn. The exact kind of damage people who rely on image fear the most. As for Victor, I heard from an old acquaintance that he'd been moved to a formal position, reviewing report content, with no signing authority, no approval power. The new company didn't forbid him from working. They just needed people who were actually capable, and he wasn't in that group. No one pushed him down. He simply fell when there was no one left for him to hide behind. One afternoon, while I was reviewing my new job files, I realized I hadn't thought about them, Diane, Victor, the mansion, for days. Not because I tried to forget, but because we were no longer in their orbit. And that's what I'd been trying to tell myself all along. The biggest victory isn't taking back power. It isn't proving who was right or wrong. It isn't making them regret anything. The real victory is that Aaron is finally seen for who he actually is. No noise. No one explaining for him. No forcing himself to fit somewhere. His value shines on its own. I stood up and walked to the window. The city below moved at its own pace. No one watching us. No one judging. No one expecting us to play a role. Freedom doesn't always make a sound, but it gives you the air to breathe. Aaron sat at his desk, focused on a new design. I watched him for a long moment, not to check if he was okay, but to take in this moment, the moment he got to be fully himself, clear, whole, no longer made smaller by anyone. I said softly, almost like closing a chapter for myself. Sometimes the only thing you need to be seen is to step out of the place that never saw you as a person." He looked up at me. He didn't speak, but his eyes were enough. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do for yourself is walk away from the place that never recognized your worth. Not to prove anything, just to start living honestly. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening all the way through.